Hi, everybody. Today is Thursday, July 10th, 2025, and our friend Alex Krainer is back with us. Welcome back, Alex.
Thank you for having me, Nima. Good to join you again.
Everybody's waiting for us to talk about what's going on in the United States with Donald Trump. And again, he came out talking about that all Putin says is somehow is nonsense and he doesn't deliver anything during the talks we have. Nice. Every time I talk with him, he's so nice, but nothing coming out of that. And here is Alex what Donald Trump said.
War that was a war that should have never happened, and a lot of people are dying, and it should end. And I don't know, we get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin. For you want to know the truth, he's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
Do you want to sanction him? Lindsey Graham has a sanctions bill on Russia. Do you want him to move
I'm looking
that?
at it. Yeah, no, I'm looking. The Senate is passing and passed very tough sanctions. But yeah, I'm looking at
And
it.
you'd sign that?
It's an optional bill. It's totally at my option. They pass it totally at my option, and to terminate totally at my option. And I'm looking at it very strongly.
Yesterday you said you want to sanction.
Alex, what's going on? How can we make sense of what's going on in the United States?
Nima, before I say anything, what was the bill that he was referring to? I missed that. The bill that was totally in his option.
It was the bill of Lindsey Graham, the sanctions against Russia.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, I find it very difficult to take anything Donald Trump says seriously. And not because I don't take Donald Trump seriously, because his rhetoric is all over the place. It's one day it's black, next day it's white. It's bait and switch nonstop. And so I'm trying to actually ignore the rhetoric because, one day he sets everybody's hair on fire on the left. The next day he sets everybody's hair on fire on the right, or everybody all together. I'm trying to focus on what is the administration's actual policy, looking longer term, and how they're trying to achieve it. And so everything that's going on now is very difficult to judge other than by things as they evolve. And so I pick up on all this talk about, his last call with Putin and how he wasn't happy. And then Putin throws a lot of bullshit at him. He's nice, but it's all meaningless. I think that's all for domestic consumption. I don't think that Trump can say like, oh yeah, Putin and we totally ganged up on everybody else. And we're doing something very different from what everybody else thinks. So he has to make this pretense of pressing Putin and pressing for this and that, going with the keylog option, pressing for, unconditional ceasefire. I think that the Russians, Putin, Lavrov, and everybody else have told the American representatives, Witkoff and Kellogg and Trump himself, that there's not going to be an unconditional 30-day ceasefire. So they all know it. So this whole theater about, we're pressing but the Russians are bad, they're just not stopping. I think this is all for, nobody is that stupid. I think it's for domestic consumption, and it's probably to pacify the side of the political spectrum that still harbors hope that Project Ukraine can be rescued somehow. It cannot be. But Trump can't come out and have a high five with Putin and say like, yay, you won and now we're going to be best friends. I've read some interpretations where the Russians' recent advances, among other things, they took full control of the Shevchenko lithium deposit, which is apparently one of the natural resource deposits that Vladimir Zelensky was trying to sell to Trump, or did sell to Trump, turned it over to the United States. I don't think that's relevant at all. I think that the deal between Putin and Trump is that Russia welcomes the United States to jointly develop all these resources, including resources in Russia. That's been talked about. Vladimir Putin has pretty much said that explicitly. Trump heard it. And I think that they have that mutual understanding, except, it's going to be on Russia's terms, which means that it's going to have to be mutually beneficial rather than the United States dictating terms and saying, we'll give you 2 cents on the dollar and be grateful that we're doing any kind of a business with you at all. Rhetoric for domestic consumption is best ignored in order to avoid brain injuries.
Alex, here is, you mentioned the way that we can understand somehow the behavior of Donald Trump. Here is what he said about sending weapons to Ukraine. Let me just play it for you.
You said that you were not sure who ordered the munitions halted to Ukraine. Have you since been able to figure that out?
Well, I haven't thought about it because we're looking at Ukraine right now and munitions, but I have not gone into it.
What does it say that such a big decision could be made inside your government without you knowing?
I would know. If a decision was made, I will know. I'll be the first to know. In fact, most likely I'd give the order, but I haven't done that yet.
So who ordered the pause last week?
I don't know. What did you tell me?
I think that's a question.
Yeah. It's somehow unbelievable what's going on in White House. And many people are asking at least with the Biden administration, we know that Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan were running the show. when we had the, I don't know, who was the woman who was the main actor in Ukraine.
Victoria Nuland.
Victoria Nuland was fired in those days, and we know who was running the show in the Biden administration. But right now, it doesn't seem that we know it. Look at Rubio. Do you think that Rubio is in charge? I don't think so. That Rubio has any sort of. Your take on that? What's going on? J.D. Vance is somehow, he disappeared from the scene somehow in the last week and these days, recent days.
Well, he was in the meeting with Netanyahu, but that meeting didn't go especially well. And then apparently Trump stormed out of the meeting, and there was no joint press conference. There was, we don't really know what happened, but something didn't go quite right. So J.D. Vance was there at least, so he's still coming to work every day apparently. But yeah, I'm at a loss. I have to say I'm at a loss, Nima, and I did read about how playing dumb can be very effective in certain complicated political situation, and I wonder if Trump isn't doing that, because I find it just very, very difficult to believe that he is dumb. By all accounts, he doesn't come across as a deep philosophical thinker. He's obviously not, the most eloquent person in the world. He often shows shocking ignorance about certain things in the world, but I think that he does know what he wants, whether that's right or wrong. And I think that what he wants is to consolidate power at home in his hands, and he wants to change the course of the United States away from being the global cop and to doing business with other countries. Now, Does that mean that he's a perfectly nice guy and that he's going to, magnanimously turn over the advantages, the playing cards that he has with various nations in the world, that he's going to give it all away and say, okay, we start from a blank slate and we're going to be really nice and we're going to do everything on mutually agreed terms? I don't expect that he will do that. He will probably try to take best advantage of any situation that he can. But I do think that he is disentangling the United States from the imperial role. And I see that, I'm not the only one who has arrived at that judgment, and I see that the Russians definitely give him the benefit of the doubt in this respect, and that they talk frequently, they talk regularly, the contacts are ongoing. Each side has a lot to offer to the other side. Each side has the same basic adversaries in the world as the other, meaning the global empire, which is what I call the global empire is basically the network of vested interest that is using the United States and certain other countries in order to consolidate their power over the world through proxies, like Ukraine, like Israel, but it comes at a huge cost. And every empire through history has paid very dearly for the maintenance of the empire, because the benefits of empire accrue to this very narrow network of vested interests, while the cost is borne by all. And the cost is usually much, much greater than these people's benefits. So they have to ultimately be resorting to dirty games, political assassinations, color revolutions, and all of these things in order to make sure that everybody's carrying water for them. But the farther this juggernaut goes, the more obvious the game becomes, and the more obvious the cost becomes versus the benefit. And we see today that the European Union, which is part of this empire, the Great Britain, which is the home turf of the empire, and the city of London is the strategic and spiritual headquarters of the empire, and the United States and Canada and Japan and all the countries that are allied that are actually vassals to this empire, they're all becoming increasingly depleted. They're all in catastrophic fiscal conditions. Their economies are disintegrating, Germany included, right? And so it's no wonder that there's a quiet but broad-based opposition to this. And who's the leadership? Who can you count on to lead? I think you don't have too many choices, and your choices will fall back on Russia and China primarily, and then Iran. And so, Trump is talking to the Russians. He may play this like, oh, the Russians are full of shit, they're playing us around, but he's talking to the Russians, unlike Biden. Biden wasn't. Biden, Sullivan and Blinken, they were talking to Netanyahu, they were talking to Starmer, they were talking to Scholz, to Macron, and so on, but they were not talking to the Russians, and they barely talked to the Chinese. I mean, Xi Jinping said to Biden to his face, "You're lying to me." That doesn't happen very often in the world of diplomacy. And Trump also says that he's getting along really well with Xi Jinping. And he struck a trade deal some 10 days ago, right, with the Chinese, which means that behind the scenes, these communications are going on. When you look at the U.S. rhetoric about China, about Taiwan, it's just horrible. So, you have to ask yourself, why are they saying these things? And I think they're saying it for domestic consumption, and I'm not talking about the general public, because the general public themselves are horrified by what they see. I think they're making this dog and pony show for the main interest groups in the United States, the military-industrial complex, the IPAC, the Christian Zionists, the big oil, the big ag, the big pharma, and so forth, which are basically all on the losing side if the United States switches from being the head of the empire, or at least the enforcement arm of the empire, to embracing multipolar integrations. And I do believe that based on the evidence presented, the Trump administration is still steering the ship in the direction of multipolar integrations.
Alex, what's going on with the Trump administration? You remember the way that he was talking with Zelensky, that you don't have a winning hand, and your cards are so weak. And I think the main issue is with Donald Trump. He's trying to play with a losing hand. He hates the position that he's in. With Russia, with Iran, look at the way that many people are arguing that Iran is weaker, Iran is defeated in the Middle East, and with the case of Syria. But after all, look at the situation in the West Asia. It's not that much in favor of Donald Trump. He has a good relationship with the Arab states, but after all, there is no enmity, there is no animosity anymore between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And above that, what's going on with Russia is even worse. I would argue that he's not able to do anything to what's going on in Ukraine to show some sort of greatness, to show some sort of being strong in a strong position. It's all losing hand, but he's trying to, in order to deal with that, he's trying to manipulate the situation if he gets some sort of leverage on these countries. This is the problem. I think the main problem with the Trump administration is it's not directly dealing with the problem, but trying to somehow manipulate the situation in order to gain leverage on them. I think with the case of Iran is even getting worse. With the case of Russia, it's much worse than what's going on in the West Asia. And anytime he tries to do something, he's even just, it seems that he's trying to get out of the quicksand, and anything you move faster, you go down faster. Do you think that, are we going to get to a point that he understands the situation that he's in? If he plays more with the situations, he's gonna the situation is gonna be even worse than before. Are we gonna get to that point? Are we gonna see this somehow? The sanity comes to the administration through Vance, through, I don't know, maybe Witkoff can help them to somehow to get to that point. But how do you see that with Donald Trump, with his attitude so far?
Well, I think that given Trump's political agenda, that the main priority is consolidating political power at home. Because if he loses the House, the Senate in the midterm elections, then his whole agenda could derail. So I think that he feels a great deal of pressure to score wins, to bring wins, to show that he's in control, to show that he can assert his will against Russia, against Iran, against Turkey, against the European Union, whoever. And so that he commands trust and loyalty of the most important people at home. And I think that so far he has been surprisingly successful in that sense. Of course, if you know what's really going on, you are, of course, dumbfounded, because a lot of what comes out of his mouth, out of his spokespeople's statements, makes no sense whatsoever. It's actually, just crazy, wrong. They are very promiscuous with truth. You know, they're just saying stuff. But somehow, so far, it seems to me that he's been very successful in consolidating power. If you compare Trump today, strictly speaking, on the American political scene, and Trump 8 years ago, he's much, much stronger. Remember, 8 years ago, he was completely lost and he was being attacked nonstop in the media, by the opposition. It's not the same anymore. I was really surprised that he managed to pass his big, beautiful bill through the House. And I know that opinions on that big, beautiful bills are very, very sharply polarized. We don't have to get into that. We can, but but that's what he wanted and that's what he got. And now I think that with respect to the Epstein files, I think he gained a great deal of power over his enemies at home with that. And that's a touchy subject, but I never expected that they would release the list. What I sort of expected is that maybe they would let some less important heads roll, that they would pick out part of that list, that they would drag them through courts, that it would be a nice public spectacle, but the big fish would never come to the surface. The reason why I thought that is because let's think about what the Epstein list is. The Epstein, who was almost certainly a Mossad intelligence asset, he was almost certainly connected to the MI6 and at least certain parts of the CIA and the American deep state. He spent years and years and years supported by it wasn't just him, it was a wide network of operatives to build up compromat on the most powerful people in the world. Why did they do that? Obviously, because it gave them power and influence over those people. You could, I don't know, you have, let's say, the chief editor of the New York Times in there. I don't know. I'm just guessing, or the chief editor of Washington Post. Well, now you have very powerful influence over what the media are going to say and write about you and about any issue of importance to you. Are you going to give up that weapon? Extremely unlikely. So, now all of that material is almost certainly in possession of Donald Trump's administration. I don't know who might be involved in that, but I would expect it will be people like Kash Patel, the DIA, the woman.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Thank you, Tulsi Gabbard, and people like that. And I think that given how polarized the political situation in the United States is, I think they're using this. And let's see how their opposition is behaving. And you'll notice that they're being incredibly quiet. I mean, given all the shenanigans, given all the nonsense and crazy stuff coming out of Trump administration, you might expect that people like Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, other members of the, Barack Obama, other members of the Democratic establishment, like John Podesta, and so forth, that they would be screaming at the top of their lungs, criticizing Trump, throwing mud at him, demonizing him in the media. Not to mention the Hollywood aristocracy, Robert De Niro and Tom Hanks and those kinds of people. But they're being awfully quiet, aren't they? They're being very quiet. So I'm going to make an assumption that this list isn't being released and will not be released because by releasing it, they would be depriving themselves of this very, very powerful weapon. And so they're going to use it. Now, are they going to use it for good purposes or not? It remains to be found out. I'm a bit nervous about that because, usually the path to hell is paved with good intentions. So it's a dirty game. Trump administration is certainly playing that game to their advantage for their political power. What they're going to do when they consolidate that power as they're doing, we will only know when things happen. But it seems to me that moving away from being the imperial hegemon and moving towards making deals with other countries is a positive change. But how successful are they going to be with all this? Are they going to take it, go far enough? Are they going to resist the temptation to maybe, shift the interest of the empire from, let's say, European elites to the American elites? Because that's a huge temptation there. Like where you say, like, wait a minute, why don't we remain an empire, but we take the power to ourselves rather than allowing the city of London and Brussels to dominate in the game? That we will not know for a very, very long time. But at any rate, the empire today has very, very powerful competition in Moscow, in Beijing, in Tehran, and in the growing BRICS movement, which has realized that if they don't unite, all these countries can be picked apart one by one. If they do unite, well, then they can be a very credible and very powerful alternative to the empire.
Alex, you mentioned the big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump is talking about and he wants to be passed. But what's in it that he's willing to sacrifice someone like Elon Musk and he's to gain it? What is the main difference when it comes to the way that Donald Trump is trying to deal with Elon Musk? And I don't see, I was so much curious, why does he need to do this to Elon Musk? Elon Musk tried to help him, and he helped him to win the presidential election. And I don't know what he's gaining by this bill that is worth even more than what Elon Musk did. We know that Elon Musk sent his spacecraft to bring the astronauts back home in the United States. It was huge the way that Elon Musk was somehow cooperating with him. And it could be beneficial for the movement in the United States that has begun, MAGA and the people that supported Donald Trump. But it seems that as time goes by, the divisions are happening within the MAGA. Your take on that?
It definitely seems that way, Nima, but I've read interpretations that suspect that the whole spat between Trump and Musk is another fake, World Wrestling Federation type of a fight, and that they are maybe at some level working in agreement with one another. You're right. Elon Musk has helped Donald Trump's election campaign enormously. Elon Musk still is in control of certain very important businesses, SpaceX, X, the former Twitter, which is today maybe one of the most powerful media companies in the world. So alienating Elon Musk doesn't really make sense. Now, there is an ideological disagreement there on, piling debt on top of more debt on top of more debt, worsening the government deficits, the budget deficits that the big beautiful bill might cause. I say might. It probably will, but you know, the Republicans loyal to Donald Trump are saying no, it will actually reduce deficits. I think that's very unlikely. But it's the whole system needs a thorough reform. You know, the government deficits and public debt have been growing on an exponential scale for decades now. It's very systemic. It didn't matter whether the government in power was a Democratic government or a Republican government. It didn't matter if the candidates promised to, you know, balance the books, pay down the debts, reduce deficits, and all this. It just simply doesn't happen. It never happens. It cannot happen, because for as long as you have this monetary system under which we all operate, you know, the fiat currency with fractional reserve lending system, the government will always have to step into the economics equation, and its role in the economy will always have to grow exponentially. Take Great Britain, the mothership of free market capitalism. Today in Great Britain, British government accounts for more than 50% of the GDP. France, another free market capitalist economy, it's almost 60%, if not more by now. In the United States, the same trends. It's not because somebody decides, hey, let's do that. It's because they have to. It's because it's systemic. And I don't want to get into the explanation of this because it's a little bit convoluted, but I did publish an article on my Substack just a few days ago explaining the exact economic, causes of why this is the case, and why the whole thing about the debts and the debt ceilings and all this is kabuki theater. It doesn't matter. It only goes like this. And it goes like this in every single country that operates under this monetary system, which is pretty much every country in the world. So if you look at Italian debts, British, German, French, American, Canadian, Japanese, whatever you want, you always get the exact same symptoms. And it's not down to the politicians. It's down to the monetary system, the way it's set out. So you might have people who are at heart conservatives, who want to see balanced budgets, no debt, small government that doesn't get that doesn't interfere in the economic game and doesn't get into people's lives. And they may want this very sincerely, but it just cannot be done within this monetary system. And I think that in this sense, Elon Musk might, as a businessman, he might sincerely have a problem with the big beautiful bill. Trump, on the other hand, has been client to the banks all his life. He has piled debt on top of debt. He has gone bankrupt multiple times, but he hasn't done it in a stupid way. He has done it. He has basically used the legal provisions where you take on a lot of debt, you pay yourself all this money, and then if things don't go exactly as you planned, you declare bankruptcy. The enterprise fails, but you didn't come out poorer for it. In fact, you're just getting richer. A lot of people do this. That's how the system is designed. And so maybe from that point of view, he doesn't have a problem with piling more debt on top of debt that's already in the system. And maybe he understands that the whole, let's put it this way, it has been clear from the get-go, probably from 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created, that the dollar was ultimately going to fail. Because if you have this fiat money system with fractional reserve banking, the currency is going to fail 100%. It's a mathematical certainty. It's baked into the system. So once you understand that, then you understand that the system is not sustainable. And going with conservative government policy isn't going to save it. It might push the ultimate collapse a bit farther away, but it's never going to save the system. So if you're in charge, if you're in control, you might think, let's accelerate this, let's push it across the ledge sooner, because we need to reform the system anyway, and we're not going to be able to reform it voluntarily. There's too many vested interests in there. They're never going to allow it. So let the system collapse, push it over. And is Trump doing this? I don't know. He's not saying it, but I know that there are people sophisticated enough around him, like well, we're supposed to think that he and Jerome Powell hate each other, but I don't know that that's true. There's Jerome Powell. There's Scott Bessent. There are other people in the government who are sophisticated enough to understand everything that I just told you, and more. And they may know that the system needs to be reformed, but completely. There needs to be a complete overhaul of the monetary system. So the one we have today cannot be saved. There's no way to save it. So maybe you have a choice, like, do we want to be really conservative and give this system a lease of life of a few years longer? Or do we want to put it out of its misery, push it over the edge, and let it collapse? And then we push our reforms on top of the ruins of the old system. I don't know. But we'll, as with all things Trump, we're only going to know with time.
Alex, we had the BRICS summit here in Brazil, and they tried to somehow deal with the situation that the United States was causing with Iran and Russia. They condemned that, the attacks on Russia and Iran. Do you feel that the way that BRICS is dealing with the geopolitical issues is somehow changing? Are they trying to assume more responsibility for what's going on the world stage, on the fight between the East and the West?
Well, I think that they all understand that what happened to Iran and what happened to Russia can happen to them tomorrow, and they're rightfully nervous about that. And so I think that A, it's normal that they want to condemn it, and B, they want to take a more assertive role in global geopolitics in order to make sure that that doesn't happen to them. We see that the former colonial power, like particularly France and Great Britain, are now almost openly trying to reassert their colonial power over their, former colonial possessions across Africa, the Middle East, and elsewhere in Asia and South America. And so I think that the leaderships of those countries who perhaps want to see their nations better developed, less vulnerable in terms of security, of course they want to close ranks and push back against these pressures. With regards to the United States, as any country, I think it's not correct to look at the United States as a monolith, because there are forces on the American political spectrum that don't want to be an empire. They want to be in good relations with other countries around the world, and they want to trade on a more equitable basis. But of course, there are those powers in the United States that do want to be the global empire and impose their diktat on everybody else. And so I think that the way to deal with these competing forces is not to condemn the United States as a nation, but to, let's say, empower those who want to be on friendly terms with the rest of the world and try to disempower those who are on the opposite side. So as you know, the statement that they issued wasn't especially strong, and I think that the Iranians were a little bit disappointed with this as well. But I think that if you antagonize the whole nation, if you take the whole nation and say like, you're bad, you're wrong, you've done these bad things to us, then you also disempower the people who might be your friends and partners in the future, and you empower, like you push against something, you get reaction. So I think that a softer statement maybe was the wise choice. And if we go back to the statement of Sergei Karaganov from a few months ago, he said it, and I think that this was a very good statement. He said that the Russian leadership sees their role as helping the United States to transition from being the global hegemon to being a normal global power in the way that's least disruptive as possible. And I think that that's smart. That's the way it should be, because you're drawing the friendship and cooperation of those forces in the American political spectrum that are receptive to this message, and you're weakening and alienating the ones who are actually your enemy, who remain loyal to the United States, the global empire, best friends forever with Britain and France. Supporters of Ukraine, supporters of Israel, and all this. Obviously, that's never going to be a transition that's going to happen from one day to the next, because Donald Trump or somebody like Donald Trump comes out one day and says, change of direction, we're doing 180 degrees. That can't happen, because they're inside of the United States. There are too many powerful groups that are pulling the opposite direction. So maybe you have to tread that balance very carefully and take that shift very gradually. And all along the way, you probably have to score political victories to make yourself seem more powerful, more credible, more trustworthy, to bolster your own authority. And it seems to me that Trump is doing exactly that. I don't like the way he's doing it, because sometimes he's going with blatant, easily disprovable lies, whereas he could be more subtle about it. Like with the recent thing with the Iranian nuclear program, when he's just absolutely insisting on the word obliterate. Well, that immediately triggers the reaction from the other side, who said like, no, you never obliterated it. That's not true. You're lying. He could have said, we damaged it severely. We have to investigate. We have to exert pressure on the Iranians to let us go and verify. And maybe you get weeks, maybe months of maneuvering space. That's how British do things, by the way, British diplomacy. They just kind of pour some sand into the works, into the wheels of global diplomacy, and they just give themselves time, and then they maneuver. And they always say, oh, it's very complicated. Oh, it's very, it's very risky. We cannot intervene here. We cannot do this because, it's the right thing to do, but, we must proceed cautiously. It's overly risky. It's dangerous. And they always give themselves a lot of time and a lot of maneuvering space. They never use, well, never say never, but I don't remember examples where they would go out with a completely obvious patent lie. They just kind of like weave slowly with ambiguous statements, with always calling for calm, avoiding violence, avoiding reprisals, and so on. And they have been very effective like this for centuries. They always do the same thing. I've been paying close attention to the way British diplomacy works. Trump is going with these bombastic statements that just kind of divide people between those who would support him and those who would push the other way. And then what you get is basically a gridlock, which I think it has very short shelf life, and the result is now the Israelis are already preparing their next attack on Israel, on Iran. So Trump has done all this footwork to say, okay, time out, ceasefire, everybody declare victory, go back to your corners, and the war is over. It's over. Well, now it's not over anymore. Anyway, so that's my that's my sharp criticism of Trump. Although I do tend to believe that he is trying to disentangle the United States from the position of the global hegemon, and I think that if he's successful at that, however he finagles it, however he gets to that, it's a better deal for everybody, for the American people and everybody else that has been at the receiving end of the American bludgeon.
Alex, what was the outcome of the meeting between Donald Trump and Netanyahu? I think we have to be realistic about the meeting, because it wasn't Donald Trump going to Israel. Netanyahu is coming to the United States for the third time, fourth time in 6 months, a third time, if I'm not mistaken. And every time he comes, he asks for something. It seems that he's going to stay in the United States and for some days. But do you feel that are we going to see new attacks on Iran by Israel in the near future? And I would argue, and how do you see, if that's the case, if so, what do they want from these attacks? I don't see anything better than what has happened so far coming out of the conflict between Iran and Israel, in favor of Israel, I'm talking about. Israel is not going to get any sort of leverage. They're going to go down if they start a new fight. I think that's obvious. I don't know if Donald Trump is talking about it with Bibi Netanyahu, even with the United States participating, somehow collaborating, helping Israel, is not going to change the game that much. You're taking that.
No, I agree with everything you said, Nima. I think that they cannot prevail over Iran. So I think that they cannot destroy Iran's nuclear program. I mean, the Iranians are aware. They've seen Israeli attacks on Syria's nuclear program. They've seen the attacks on Iraq's nuclear program. They are certainly aware of Israeli attempts and plans to destroy Pakistan's nuclear program. And they had more than 20 years to prepare for this and to design their nuclear program in the way that is as robust and difficult to destroy as possible, among other things by dispersing it geographically and by burying it very, very deep underground, so that you can't really destroy it with bombing campaigns. So I think that the plan B and plan C for the West, and in this case, Israel is simply a proxy of the Western Empire. Plan B is regime change, which now looks unrealistic as well. Plan C is to try to partition Iran. And so I think this is why they activated Azerbaijan and Turkey. And it seems to me that by antagonizing Iran, the risk in partitioning Iran would be that they carve away the northwest, the South Azerbaijan, right, which is the northwest region of Iran. And if they succeeded at this by using Azerbaijan as their proxy, by probably funding and organizing separatist movements inside Iraq and using, I don't know, MEK or even the Kurds and the Syrian jihadis, they could cut Iran from the Caspian Sea coastline. And if they achieve that, well, then they cut off the north-south trade corridor. And now they've put a major spanner into China's Belt and Road Initiative. And I think that this is the reason why China and Iran are now rushing the program to provide Chinese JC-10 jets to Iran. These jets have been battle tested now in the war between India and Pakistan in May of this year, early May. You remember there was I think it was at the end of April, there was terror attack in Kashmir, and there were some 25, 26 civilians killed by Pakistani extremists, right? And then on the night of the 6th to 7th May, India mounted an air attack against Pakistani military targets as a how do you call it? As a retaliation. Now, the interesting aspect of this, which is extremely important in this whole equation, is that the Indians, a few years ago, the Indians have purchased a fleet of, I think, 36 French Rafale jets. And the contract was worth $9 billion, which I think works out to about $250 billion per aircraft. So extremely expensive. And India's objective in this was to achieve air primacy over Pakistan. This was extremely important. So this was a major purchase. And it was, I think, one of the first such contracts where India shifts from using Russian arms to using Western-produced arms. And it turned out to be a very bad idea, because what happened is that Pakistan under Imran Khan reoriented Pakistan towards Chinese arm manufacturers, among other things, these Chinese JC-10 jets, J-10C jets. And so here's what happened on the night of the 6th to 7th May. India launched 6 aircraft to strike at Pakistani military targets. And at least 4 of these aircrafts were the French Rafale jets. And okay, so Pakistanis, in addition to having these Chinese J-10C jet fighters, also have use Chinese radars and Chinese satellite intelligence. And so they immediately knew that the attack was coming. And so they scrambled. I couldn't find out whether it was one Chinese jet or more, but this Chinese jet can carry 9 missiles, and they launched it with 6 air-to-air missiles, right? The jet itself has a powerful radar that can spot targets at over 200 kilometers distance. And they can lock simultaneously up to 16 individual targets. Well, at 200 kilometers, they locked onto these Indian jets. From 150 kilometers, they launched their 6, I think they're called PL-15 air-to-air missiles, Chinese again. And they downed all 6 jets that the Indians launched. This took Indian and Western military circles completely by shock, because it was extremely important that Western weapons prove themselves superior to Chinese or Russian weapons. And so this was an absolutely spectacular demonstration of exactly the opposite. Some military analysts believe that the whole clash between India and Pakistan was meant to inhibit Pakistanis, to intimidate them from taking an overly supportive role of Iran, towards Iran, because Pakistan's position, the importance of Pakistan strategically is that they're a Muslim country. They have a nuclear weapon, and they are the 13th most powerful military in the world. And they are very supportive of Iran. So before going to war with Iran, which was already planned out, was already a done deal, they wanted to intimidate Pakistan from coming out and backing up the Iranians. And this failed very spectacularly. And so the whole business of a regime changing Iran doesn't seem that it's going to be happening. Destroying Iran's nuclear project, that doesn't seem that it's going to be happening. So Plan C is, again, trying to partition Iran, to carve off strategic parts of Iran away from the Tehran government. But it seems to me that this is their weak card. They're playing the weak card. The Azerbaijanis have put themselves in a very embarrassing position now because, they're antagonizing the Russians, they're antagonizing the Iranians, but these are their, geographically, these are their neighbors. Their trade depends largely on both Iran and Russia. So I don't know that this is going to work out. And I think that, in fact, the Western Empire, Israel, Azerbaijan, Turkey, all of that included, have actually sustained a strategic defeat. And now, they're doing this arson attack. If they can create chaos, maybe they can save their game. But it doesn't. They're definitely playing the losing side now.
Alex, did you watch the interview that the president of Iran, Pezeshkian, had with Tucker Carlson?
No, I only watched a few excerpts of it. I didn't watch the whole thing.
Yeah, what he was saying in terms of the Israeli assassinations in Iran, he said that they wanted to assassinate him as well.
Yes, I did see that.
Yeah, look at the plan. It was much bigger than what we thought before. It was all about killing the president, the supreme leader of Iran, all the commanders together. And we can say, in the aftermath of what has happened, we can say that they failed to achieve the objective. That's why everything went the way that we saw in the aftermath. The attack on Iran, in the first 8 hours, Iran was somehow surprised by the attack, and then they came out and they gained the responsibility. They gained their position, and they attacked Israel and so forth and so on. But I don't see that happening again for Israel. I don't see that there is something else happening in favor of Israel. They did the best they could do in their eyes.
Yes, correct, Nima. They have been preparing this for a very long time, and it takes a very long time to prepare the terrain, to cultivate sources, to cultivate collaborators, to set up the attacks. Once you run the attack, well, then you no longer have that ammunition. Like with the pager attacks. Once you've done that, you can't redo it again. You have to come up with something else. And obviously it takes years to prepare these things. So I think that, taking down Iran, regime changing Iran, has been so extremely important to them that they have probably shot their best shot against Iran, and it failed. It was partially successful. It was obviously a very clever gambit. They have capable intelligence services. They obviously have collaboration. I'm talking about Mossad, the Israelis, but they obviously have extensive collaboration from the British and American intelligence services, which have co-opted a lot of these organizations like IAEA. So it's no wonder they were able to do a good job. But now that they've run that course, Iranians now understand, and so they've eliminated a lot of these Mossad, CIA, MI6 networks within their country. They kicked out IAEA, and they have probably taken measures to make Iranian leadership less vulnerable to tracing, to hacks, to informants reporting on their movements and so forth. And so you will not be able to mount this attack successfully again. I think that they, obviously the temptation was to try to do as they've done with Hezbollah, to try the kind of regime change operation they successfully ran in Syria, but they failed. And now it's very obvious that they failed. And not only did they fail, they've obviously learned that they're not invulnerable behind their David Sling and Arrow 3 and Iron Dome and all of these systems, because the Iranians managed to hack them. And when I mean hack them, I don't just mean hacking into the system themselves, but the Iranians have learned very well how Israeli defense systems work. And you only have so many launchers, and these launchers only have so many rockets in them. And once you fire off all the rockets, it takes time to recharge the launchers again. And so the Iranians, already back in October, they understood a lot of how this works, and so now they know they need to launch this type of attack to absorb all the Israeli and American air defenses, and then for a period of time they're completely naked, and then you strike the big targets almost unopposed. And so now we've seen that Israel has sustained a lot more damage than we initially understood. And they understand that they can't just get away with bombing here and there, and then life goes on happily ever after in Israel. Their ports have been destroyed, refineries, their military intelligence centers, Mossad centers, their I don't know what it's called. I can't repeat that, or the Israeli equivalent of the Pentagon. And if they try to launch any kind of an attack against Iran again, the next reprisal will probably be bigger and more intense than what we've seen.
It's called Amman. It's called something like that.
Yes, but I don't know exactly how you pronounce it. Okay, but you know what I mean. And so the next reprisal from Iran is likely going to be a lot bigger and a lot more intense, and they're probably not going to stop. They're probably not going to say like, okay, Donald Trump, thank you very much. Because it's you, we're going to stop this. And so I think that the only card the West has to play is to attempt to partition Iran, to balkanize it. And so therefore, I think that the Iranians now have to be very careful and very vigilant towards internal subterfuge, sabotage, infiltration of separatist groups, of terrorist groups, Britain has specialized in flooding their target nations with drugs. So they have to be careful with respect to an opium war being forced on them. So the game will change, but I think that as time goes by, the West is playing weaker and weaker and weaker hand, and their beachhead in Israel is now so beat up and so weakened that I doubt that it represents a real danger to Iran.
Alex, those people who are criticizing Iran to be in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in all these neighboring countries, you have to understand what's going on with Iran and the situation with the recent attack on Iran. We have 12 million undocumented, mostly undocumented immigrants in Iran. You imagine a country with 90 million people having 12 million mostly undocumented immigrants. How they can create a big network of these terrorists in Iran. And Iran is right now trying to deal with that. But after all, the stability of the way that they have destabilized the region somehow benefited them in these attacks on Iran. But it doesn't seem that I would argue with this network of immigrants, their Iranian intelligence is just removing them, sending them back, and all of this. And I don't see anything of that sort would happen in the near future. And maybe they have collaborators in Iran within the Iranian society, as you mentioned, these oppositions, but they're minuscule. They're not that much important. They're not that much. They cannot be that much involved as these immigrants were involved in the attacks on Iran. Do you feel that Donald Trump and his administration would somehow support Israel to attack again? And I think we have to say cui bono. Who's going to benefit from that? Is Donald Trump going to benefit of a new attack on Iran, an Israeli attack on Iran?
I don't think so, Nima. And I think that maybe that was where Donald Trump's meeting with Netanyahu didn't go so well, because Netanyahu is desperate to renew hostilities with Iran. Any hostility, now they're going to be launching a ground operation into Lebanon, because Netanyahu can't really stay in power unless he's fighting a war somewhere. And not only do they want to give it another go against Iran, they want to also go to war against Pakistan. This is another thing that the Israelis are planning. They want to destroy Pakistan's nuclear program, and they're already saying, after we're done with Iran, next target Pakistan. I don't think that this suits the United States, because it constantly puts the United States on the hook to have to come to Israel's aid, because you have a very, very powerful voter bloc in the United States, the Zionist Jews, the Christian evangelicals, who will make it impossible for any administration to sit aside as maybe Iran is beating down Israel. So any action of this kind, any aggressive action by Israel that is drawing Israel into a war that they cannot win, then automatically puts the United States on the hook to come to Israel's aid, which means potentially a quagmire, potentially thousands of U.S. troops killed, U.S. aircraft carriers, destroyers, frigates sunk, thousands of U.S. soldiers in the bottom of the sea, in the Indian Ocean and Persian Gulf. And so it's a potential catastrophe for Trump politically. And so, you can't do this halfway. So you would have to go all in, full on war against Iran, or you just have to go back and say, not our war, we're not doing this, which again is impossible because of these pro-Israeli forces in the United States. So Trump, I think, is desperate for the peace in the Middle East to hold, and Netanyahu is desperate for the peace to die in the Middle East. And so I think that here they have a big conflict. And my guess is that this is the reason for these meetings being as contentious as they appear to be at the moment. Meanwhile, the Chinese are providing defenses to Iran, jet fighters. For sure, the next attempt by either United States or Israelis or whoever tries is not going to go even as well as the last attack. So I don't know, but I think that it's game over for Western hegemony in that region. Of course, they still have cards to play. They can still blow things up. They can still launch rockets and drop bombs from aircraft. So the war can still carry on for who knows how long, months, maybe years, but they cannot win. They cannot win. Trump is in this position where he's desperate for there not to be any war, but his ally in the Middle East is desperate to do exactly the opposite. How Trump is going to handle it, God only knows. We'll find out. But I think he can use some coaching about how to do public relations, because these bombastic statements and these blatant lies that he's pronouncing in front of people, ultimately I think they have very short legs, and then he finds himself back to square one. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the situation, because Iran has proven itself a very, very tough adversary to the Western Empire, because Iran has support from China and Russia, and hopefully whatever shenanigans they're trying to get going through Azerbaijan and Turkey, I think it's not going to get very far. And if this was a strong card to play, they would have played it first. They would have done that part first, but they didn't. They're doing it because there's nothing left to play.
Alex, we've learned that Marco Rubio is meeting with Lavrov in ASEAN, and do we know what they're talking about? What is it? Can you understand what's going on? Where is Witkoff, by the way? Why we have Marco Rubio again to the scene and talking with Russians? And we know Marco Rubio and his intentions.
Well, I wish I knew, Nima, but Marco Rubio is going to do what he's told to do, and he's part of the Trump administration. I think that they need Russian help and collaboration for a whole variety of reasons. And Marco Rubio was the person who said in the Senate hearings in January that the United States is going a different route, that they're moving away from the post-World War II global order and in favor of multipolar integrations. So my hope is that that's what they're going to be discussing. We'll find out after they've met what they've discussed, or maybe we won't. Maybe we'll get readouts that omit certain important parts of the discussion, exactly to avoid triggering the Trump's opposition at home. But I do expect kind of that it's going to be something on the line of constructive cooperation, because there's just nothing to gain from either Americans or for the Russians from confrontations, from issuing ultimatum mutually, because then it's pushing the United States back into the ranks of the Western Empire, and it's pushing Russia back into a more difficult and risky position both in Ukraine and in the Middle East, and vis-a-vis NATO, because Russia wants to avoid a global war between Russia and NATO, right? And that war is much, much less likely to happen if the United States doesn't participate. So I think that, if you read history going back to the 1800s, you understand that Russia and the United States naturally are allies, or should be natural allies to one another. And, given how complicated, how polarized, how risky the situation in the world is, for the whole world to escalate into a potentially a nuclear war, they have a lot to lose by not cooperating, and they have a hell of a lot to gain by cooperating. They still need the intermediate, some way of renewing the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, or a different treaty. Trump has spoken about trying to denuclearize the world, trying to get rid of the nuclear weapons. I certainly hope that that's going to be on the agenda as well.
Before wrapping up, I really love the way that China is dealing with the issues, just sitting back and.
But you notice, Nima, the Chinese told, who was it? Was it the stunning and beautiful Kaja Kallas, that the Chinese will back Russia all the way 100% in Ukraine? And that's something that you knew if you understand what the issues are. You can't trade this relationship away by inducing them like, hey, we're going to drop some tariffs. Hey, we're going to... No, because the Chinese know that if Russia falls, if the West manages to regime change Russia, then they're going to use Russia against China in exactly the same way that they've used Ukraine against Russia. So they know that they cannot drop Russia as an ally. And the stunning and beautiful and very capable and smart Kaja Kallas was extremely dumb to think that she can somehow talk the Chinese into loosening their alliance with the Russians. For the rest of the humanity, this is all good news.
Because we know, because these people are not part of the game. They're just somehow the little pieces on the game. They're doing their job, but they don't know what's the strategy behind.
Yes, exactly. They're playing for their team without really knowing what the game is actually all about.
Yeah.
But good thing that the Western powers are finding themselves, by some strange inertia, coerced to always staff their key posts with weaker and weaker players, with lesser and lesser caliber leaders, and it's all kind of disintegrating.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alex, for being with us today.
Always a pleasure, Nima. Thank you for the invite. Greetings to your viewers and listeners. Thank you for your good work. And until the next time.
Alex, next time we have to put your Substack here below your name, and because many people don't know where is the address to your Substack. I'm going to put it in the description of the video. Those people who want to access what Alex is putting on his Substack. Very interesting articles, by the way. Thank you so much. But next time we're gonna put it below your name, right below your name.
Thank you. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Take care.
See you soon, Alex. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.